She posted our breakup before she told me it was over. The caption read like a poem, but every line was a knife, pre-written and time-stamped for noon. I was still color grading her latest reel when I found it, tucked between sponsored drafts and branded mantras. In her version, she escaped my control. In mine, I filmed her freedom, frame by frame, shot by shot, never knowing I was documenting my own erasure. She cast me as the villain in a story I helped her write, but I kept the footage she never meant to be seen. And when I hit upload, the truth fractured the feed in two. Chapter 1. The Perfect Frame. The morning light filtered through the glass walls like a perfectly calculated exposure, diffused, flattering, cinematic. Everything in the house was designed for the camera. The color palette of soft taupes and creams, the minimalist furniture placed with geometric precision, the plants arranged not for air but for balance in the shot. Nina Blair sat at the edge of the marble kitchen island, a soft robe slipping just off one shoulder, legs crossed with unconscious poise, eyes glued to her phone. Her voice floated in the room, practiced and bright. "Hey loves, quick morning check-in. Sunlight's a little harsh today, but we're vibing with it, right?" Dennis adjusted the softbox just slightly, angling it off a reflective surface to take the edge off the glare. He didn't respond. He hadn't needed to for a long time. His silence was part of the set design. He double-checked the frame. Foreground with her almond milk latte, midground with her glowing skin, and background with that signature palm tree outside the window. All of it calibrated. All of it hers. He hit record. Nina gave the camera a practiced laugh, then said, "Honestly, I've been feeling this deep call to shift, more authenticity, more alignment." Her fingers fluttered toward her necklace, a delicate gold triangle. She paused just long enough to seem thoughtful, then smiled wide. "But we'll unpack that later. You're not ready yet." Cut. The moment the red light clicked off, so did her expression. She picked up the latte, didn't look at him. "You got it?" she asked. "Yeah," he said, already checking the histogram on the screen. White balance held. Skin tones clean. "Cool," she muttered, walking off toward the bedroom. No thank you, no smile. Not even a glance. Dennis stood there for a moment, the hum of LED panels vibrating in the silence. Today was her birthday. He had been working on a tribute video for 2 weeks, gathering years of unseen footage, private moments, shots that spoke not to the brand, but to the woman he thought he knew. Back in the studio, his space, the basement she never entered, he watched her face on one of 6 monitors. She was laughing in a shot from 3 years ago, wearing sweats and no makeup, flipping pancakes with music blaring in the background. He'd color graded it to look like a memory. He wanted tonight to matter. He wanted her to remember that this wasn't just a feed, it was their life. But as he cued the morning's footage for rendering, he caught something strange in the metadata, a file he hadn't named. A preview image he didn't recognize. His gut tensed. The perfect frame had a crack. Chapter 2. Behind the Glamour. The studio was a windowless bunker beneath the pristine house, soundproofed, dimly lit, and lined with black acoustic panels. It smelled faintly of soldered cables, dust-filtered vents, and the stale tension of long, silent hours. In this cave of light and shadow, Dennis thrived. Here, he wasn't Nina's husband. He was the technician, the architect, the hidden heartbeat of her empire. 6 monitors glowed in the half-darkness, each showing a different timeline, a different version of the woman the world adored. He had every stage of her evolution stored meticulously across dozens of drives. each labeled by year, campaign, platform. NB_summer_crush_21, soul shift _retreat _reels, Q4 sponsor _everglow. He had cataloged her image more thoroughly than most people catalog their own identity. He leaned back in his chair, cracking his knuckles. The audio sync for today's shoot had been slightly off, something subtle in the echo. Maybe the room was too hot, or maybe Nina's tone had shifted again. She had a way of modulating her voice, depending on who she thought was watching. A chirpier cadence for teens, a lower, breathy tone for spiritual rebirth collapse. Dennis had studied her patterns like a sound designer studies ambient frequencies. He made her shine. That was his job. He clicked open a side folder, personal_projects. It had been nearly a year since he touched it. Inside were 3 short documentaries he'd started and abandoned. One on migrant vineyard workers, one on abandoned churches in the Mojave, one just titled Echo. He stared at them for a long moment, then closed the folder. Instead, he opened the tribute cut for her birthday, an elegant sequence starting with handheld footage from their early days, when she had barely 900 followers and they filmed skincare hacks in their shared bathroom. There was one shot, lit only by morning sun, where she looked at the camera and whispered, "Do you really think I could make it?" Back then, she was raw, unsure, still real. Now she had a management team, a posting calendar, AI-assisted comment filters. She spoke to followers, not to people. And him? He wasn't sure anymore. He pressed play and watched the tribute roll again, measuring its emotional beats like a composer checking tempo. Then a quiet ping. He switched windows. A message from the project management app. Someone had uploaded a draft reel to the brand account. Not him. Not scheduled. He opened it. It was Nina, alone, standing on a beach at dusk. The caption overlay read, "Freedom doesn't always look like escape. Sometimes it's subtraction." The clip was moody, stylized. Shot on prime lens. Clean cut. Not his work. Someone else had filmed her. Someone else had edited this. And she hadn't told him. He stared at the screen. The beach. The framing. The absence of his touch. His hands were cold. He shut the file. But he couldn't unsee it. Chapter 3. Ghosts in the Algorithm. The numbers didn't lie. They just didn't tell the whole story. Dennis sat hunched over the analytics dashboard, eyes scanning rows of performance data like a forensic accountant chasing missing funds. Views were down. Shares flatlined. Engagement, normally spiky and volatile, was eerily even, as if an invisible hand was smoothing out every post. He refreshed the stats twice. Then again, something was off. He pulled up the publishing calendar. At a glance, everything seemed in order. His uploads, tag drafts, scheduled reels. But buried in the archive of unpublished content was a cluster of new drafts he'd never seen. 5 short vertical videos. Slick transitions, altered LUTs, glitchy overlays. The captions were distant from Nina's usual brand voice. Less intimate, more declarative. One was titled "Dismantle the Gaze." Another, "Sovereignty is a Solo Path." Each had a note. "Icy." No full name. Just that signature. He clicked one open. Nina stood in a minimal concrete hallway, light slicing through blinds like prison bars. Her expression was fierce, untouchable. "Don't let anyone own your image," she said, walking toward the lens. "Even if they love you." He hit pause. It was cinematic. Almost too cinematic. Not just someone else's style, someone else's eye. He flipped open his notes app and searched every name in her current management network. No one matched by C. Nothing in the Dropbox logs, nothing in the brand planner. But the watermark on one of the file encodes read, Christoph CMV underscore V1.mp4. Christoph. The name was unfamiliar, but the presence wasn't. He'd felt it creeping in, stealth edits, shifting tones, aesthetic pivots that mimicked intimacy but rang hollow. Nina had never spoken of a new creative. If this was a freelancer, why keep him a secret? His thoughts jumped tracks. He remembered how she'd recently started saying things like, "Let me handle this post," or "I'll just do a quick cut myself." At first, he assumed it was empowerment. Now it felt like a smokescreen. He minimized the window, reopened the Instagram business suite. An admin access log popped up. One new admin added 2 weeks ago. Not by him. He scrolled down. Christoph underscore management. Dennis sat back slowly, the room feeling suddenly smaller, colder. His pulse didn't spike. His breath didn't quicken. But his perception shifted, like the lens had fogged, and he hadn't noticed until now. He'd built the system. Every dashboard, every automation, every security layer. And still, someone had slipped in. He reached for his notepad and wrote, deliberately, access compromised, narrative diverging, asset control slipping. At that moment, his phone buzzed. A new reel had just gone live on Nina's page. It wasn't one of his. He opened it. Nina, laughing on a rooftop, wrapped in someone's oversized jacket against a blazing sunset. No filters. No brand tags. Just a quote in bold white text. Chapter 4. The Anniversary Post. The sun hadn't yet risen when Dennis woke with a jolt, heart hammering like a misplaced snare in an otherwise quiet score. He didn't know why. The room was still, the air cool. Nina lay beside him, her back turned, breathing slow and shallow under a satin sheet. Her phone glowed faintly on the nightstand, screen dimming as if guilty. He sat up, slipped out of bed, padded silently downstairs to the studio. Today was her birthday. He'd planned everything. A private dinner, a rooftop projection of the tribute video, a quiet evening without cameras. A moment of real life, not the curated one. He opened the publishing dashboard to schedule the final cut for 8 p.m. Something told him to double-check the queue. There it was. A post titled, How I Escaped a Controlling Marriage. He stared, not breathing, not blinking. The caption was long, crafted, not typed. It began gently. Sometimes, love becomes a mirror you're not allowed to clean. Then it darkened. He told me when to post. He told me what to wear. He filmed every version of me until I couldn't recognize the original. Dennis's throat clenched. He said I needed him, that I wouldn't exist online without his vision, that no one else would understand my angles. I started to believe him. That's how control works. It dresses up like devotion. The post was scheduled to go live at noon. Below the caption, a video preview had already rendered, a slow pan across the living room, color graded to look sterile and dim. Dennis appeared in the background, framed mid-sentence, jaw tight, pointing at a lighting setup. The frame froze right as his hand extended, like a slap that never landed. The voiceover was her own, calm, measured, devastating. You can love your captor. That doesn't mean it isn't a cage. He slammed the laptop shut. Not because he didn't want to see more. Because he'd already seen enough. His mind spun in fragmented loops. Every line in that caption was a repurposed memory, warped, inverted, torn from its origin. She'd taken years of creative partnership and rewritten it into a script where he was the villain, the image tyrant, the shadow in the shot. He stumbled into the bathroom, splashed cold water on his face, stared at the man in the mirror. No filters. No lighting rig. Just fatigue. Shock. Betrayal. Back upstairs, Nina was awake, scrolling. Their eyes met for a moment, brief and unreadable. "Big day," she said, voice light. "You good?" Dennis didn't answer. He just nodded, then turned away as something inside him quietly broke. Chapter 5. Shadows and Stories. The coastline was nearly empty that morning. Just a few early surfers, their silhouettes cutting against the silver water and the distant thud of waves dissolving into foam. Dennis stood at the edge of the pier, phone in one hand, the wind pulling at his sleeves, his thoughts louder than the Pacific. Below him, gulls cried like static in a broken signal. He hadn't spoken since reading the scheduled post. Hadn't answered Nina. Hadn't touched the tribute video, still waiting on his timeline like a ghost of something that never existed. He'd driven without thinking, just away. From the house. From the story she was preparing to unleash. From himself. He remembered filming her here once, years ago, before she had an audience. No stylist, no agenda. Just her, barefoot in the sand, laughing because the wind stole her hat mid-sentence. That clip had never made it to the feed. Too raw, too uncurated. But to him, it was perfect. Now, the same location felt like a crime scene. She had rewritten their story, and tomorrow, the internet would believe it. Why wouldn't they? The edit was clean. The tone persuasive. He knew the power of a good narrative arc. He'd written them for her 100 times. His phone buzzed. A notification. Nina had just posted new stories. He opened them. First slide. A boomerang in soft sunset tones. 2 wine glasses clinking on a rooftop. Next, a slow zoom into her smile. Chin resting on someone's shoulder. A man, taller than him, hoodie drawn up, sunglasses on. Final slide. A still image. Nina and Christoph, cheek to cheek, his hand on her waist. Caption. Some people film you. Some people see you. No tags. No mentions. Just implication. Dennis stared at the screen. He felt it first in his chest. Tight. Quiet. But then it moved outward, up his throat, burning behind his eyes. He didn't cry. Not here. Not now. Instead, he turned off the phone and looked out over the ocean, where the line between sky and water had all but disappeared. For a long time, he just stood there. Then, slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a USB drive. He turned it over in his hand. The latest backup of her entire content archive. The originals. The edits. The unused takes. The parts she didn't want seen. He hadn't intended to use it. But something shifted. She'd weaponized the narrative. Now, he would expose the reality. Not out of revenge. Out of clarity. Out of survival. As the sun lifted behind him, casting long shadows across the planks, Dennis walked back to his car. No soundtrack. No lens flares. Just footsteps. Determined. Real. The feed was about to fracture. Chapter 6. Reclaiming the feed. Dennis returned to the house like a ghost moving through a set where the production had already wrapped. Lights were still on, but nothing felt alive. Nina was gone. A half-finished smoothie sat on the kitchen counter beside a ring light, left humming in standby. Her perfume lingered faintly in the hallway, a curated floral scent he once described in a caption as the essence of August. Now it felt like smoke. He didn't pause. He moved with focus, the kind that came from knowing you were out of time. Downstairs, in the cool dimness of his studio, he closed the soundproof door and turned off the Wi-Fi. No notifications. No interference. He pulled out the USB drive and slid it into the console like arming a weapon. Folders bloomed open, years of footage sorted by platform, date, campaign. But he wasn't here to reminisce. He located the master archive of behind-the-scenes recordings. Nina always hated those files, too candid, too revealing. But Dennis had saved them all. Quiet clips, offhand comments, the way her voice shifted when the camera stopped rolling, the disinterest, the orders, the eye rolls. He opened a new timeline and began building the reel. No narration, no added music, no flashy cuts, just the raw material, the reality between the takes. He added timestamps, cross-referenced published versions. Let the contrast speak for itself. He kept it clinical, almost documentary-like. Not a revenge piece. A case study. A reflection of a digital illusion cracking under its own weight. When he finished, he sat back, hands trembling, not from doubt, but from the certainty that there was no going back. He logged into the accounts. Most were still under his control. He had set up the back end, after all. Scheduled automations, security layers, business emails. Christoph had slipped in through surface permissions. But the core infrastructure? That was still Dennis. First, he revoked admin rights from Nina and Christoph. Then he disabled auto-publishing on their master calendar. Then, finally, he posted the reel. Title: The Real Nina Blair, Behind the Glam. Caption: I never wanted to speak, but you deserve to see what I saw. He didn't wait to see the reactions. He just shut off the monitor and walked outside. By the time he returned an hour later, the video had exploded. His phone was buzzing nonstop. On screen, a stream of comments flowed like wildfire. Is this real? She talked to him like he was a servant, who even edited her apology videos. This feels too raw to be fake. I believed in her. Now I'm sick. Others pushed back. He's bitter. This is twisted revenge. Nice montage. Still not proof. Dennis sat in the dark, the glow of the screens flickering across his face. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The illusion had ruptured. And now, the feed was his. Chapter 7. The Digital Earthquake. By dawn, the story had detonated across the internet. Reaction channels clipped the reel and uploaded their commentary within hours. TikTok was flooded with side-by-side comparisons. Nina's polished monologues spliced against the raw footage Dennis had posted. Twitter was a war zone. Instagram, a split screen of solidarity and outrage. Podcasters went live before brushing their teeth. She curated everything, down to her size, one said. This isn't just relationship drama. It's deception as content. On a live stream, a digital ethics influencer leaned forward and said, "What we're seeing is the collapse of a carefully managed persona." And the guy behind the camera? He's the architect pulling the curtain. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag justice for Dennis. Hashtag free Nina. Hashtag content collapse. Hashtag who owns the truth. The feed was no longer a feed. It was a battlefield. Dennis sat in his car, parked outside a grocery store he hadn't entered, phone buzzing in rhythmic spasms. His name was trending. His voice, once buried under Nina's branding, was now front and center, and people had opinions. A new message popped up. Someone had to say it. Thank you. Another followed. You just wanted clout. Admit it. Then, she manipulated us. I donated to her retreat fund. I feel sick. Followed by, men can gaslight too. Don't fall for the aesthetic of victimhood. It didn't matter whether they praised or condemned him. The volume was deafening. The algorithm had turned him into its latest drama cycle. And then came Christoph. He posted a video, Shot in vertical format, staged but subtle. Clean background. Casual hoodie. Framed with that deliberate informality influencers used to mimic sincerity. I didn't want to comment, he said, hands clasped. But I can't stay silent while Nina is being digitally stalked by someone who once claimed to love her. He paused. Let it hang. I was there when she cried over being told her body wasn't on brand. When she asked for space and got scheduled for another shoot. I was there when she decided to reclaim her voice. On screen, comments exploded. She's lucky to have him. This man is a walking PR campaign. He deflected everything. Notice how he never denies editing her content. Did he just spin gaslighting into a defense? Dennis watched in silence. He didn't respond. Not yet. Because truth, when packaged for clicks, still needed curation. Instead, he opened a private folder. Inside it, a shot Nina never posted. Christoph standing off camera during a supposed solo sunrise shoot, giving her hand signals, mouthing lines. Time-stamped. Framed in reflection. Truth wasn't just what was said. It was what was hidden. Dennis stared at the screen. The earthquake had begun. Now came the aftershocks. Chapter 8. Allies in the Algorithm. The message arrived as a DM request, buried beneath 1,000 notifications. Short. Direct. I believe you. She did it to me too. Sky. Dennis paused. The name rang distant bells. He searched his email archives, then found the connection. A former assistant producer Nina had hired, praised publicly, then fired quietly 6 months ago for clashing energies. He replied, "Need to talk. Not on socials. Can you meet?" They met the next day in a cafe far from sunset. Sky was younger than he remembered, all denim and tension, with the brittle calm of someone used to not being heard. She said I was ruining the vibe, Sky said, wrapping her hands around a mug she hadn't touched. Because I suggested we stop reshooting off-the-cuff moments 12 times. She pulled out a battered hard drive, the label long faded. This is from the New Moon series campaign. You know, the spiritual reawakening arc. She had us run drafts where she cries, real tears, but timed to music. She picked the version where her voice cracked just enough. Sky's laptop lit up between them. File after file opened. B-rolls, notes with her handwriting, alternate takes of truth-sharing videos, all time-stamped and scripted. One folder was labeled Exit Strategy. Dennis leaned in. Inside, planning docs for a complete persona shift. Phase 1. Break from masculine lens. Phase 2. Emotional reclamation. Phase 3. Solo rebuild. Final stage. Crisis authenticity, controlled burn. She called it falling forward, Sky said. She wanted to trigger just enough backlash to go viral without losing the core fan base. Christoph said it would triple her engagement. Dennis sat back. It wasn't just betrayal. It was premeditated. He opened his own files, syncing timelines. The candid rooftop post with Christoph aligned exactly with the timeline labeled Phase 3, a move calculated 6 weeks in advance. She'd scheduled his erasure before he even knew he was disappearing. They worked late into the night, Sky restoring corrupted clips, Dennis cross-referencing metadata. What they built wasn't just a reaction, it was a documentary. A forensic breakdown of a persona engineered like a brand campaign. Still, he hesitated. I don't want this to be just vengeance, he said. If we go public with this, it has to mean something. Sky looked at him, exhausted but sharp. Then make it about everyone she did this to. Not just you. By morning, they had a title. Constructed Intimacy, the Nina Blair Effect. And a plan. Not a hit piece. A truth capsule. One designed not to go viral, but to outlive the algorithm. Chapter 9. The Platform Strikes Back. The takedown came at 2:14 a.m. Dennis was asleep for exactly 40 minutes when his phone buzzed like an alarm with a grudge. Your account has been restricted due to a copyright violation. One or more posts have been removed for breaching community guidelines. He sat up in the dark, barely breathing. Then came the second wave. Monetization frozen, links disabled, inbox locked. Every video containing behind-the-scenes footage flagged. Dozens of them. All the raw material of constructed intimacy, now labeled as unauthorized use of private content. It was a coordinated strike. Dennis stared at the notifications, heart steady but slow. Not panic. Not yet. He knew this terrain. It was corporate now, not personal. He sent a single text to Sky. They hit the archive. Lock everything. VPN. Offline storage now. Then he called Elaine. She picked up instantly. I'm already on it, she said before he could speak. She filed a DMCA claim using a talent rights shell company. Christoph's name is all over the paperwork. Dennis rubbed his eyes. She's claiming I stole my own footage? Not just stole. She's reframing it as harassment. Elaine continued. Their legal language is careful. They're not denying it happened. They're saying its release constitutes abuse. He was quiet for a beat. Can we fight it? I've already filed a counter notice. Under contract, you are the original videographer and editor of every disputed file. She signed releases on all of it. The only gray area is how she's painting your intent. Truth, Dennis said, voice flat, isn't abusive. Not legally, but algorithmically, she exhaled. We're playing on a platform that rewards illusion. They still see her as the brand. By midday, hashtag shifted. Hashtag Protect Nina began to trend. Think pieces emerged. Is exposing the behind-the-scenes an act of violence? Podcasts questioned his motives. Sympathetic creators called for decentralized compassion and moving away from male-crafted narratives. One creator posted, even if he filmed it, does that give him the right to publish her pain? Elaine wasn't rattled. Let them talk. This isn't the trial. This is the warm-up act. She launched a counter-campaign with Sky, presenting contracts, annotated call sheets, and metadata trails. Nothing emotional, just receipts. The tone was surgical, legal, unimpeachable. Meanwhile, Dennis cut a silent short, 2 minutes of raw camera checks, and used takes, background moments. No commentary, no caption. It spread anyway. One viewer posted, I can't tell if this is beautiful or devastating. Probably both. Another, this isn't revenge. This is exposure. But the platform still throttled the reach. Views stalled. Shares slowed. Dennis leaned over the desk and whispered to himself, not as a prayer, but as a calculation. She taught them how to perform truth. I'll show them what truth sounds like when no one's performing. The platform had struck first, but he had barely started to answer. Chapter 10, Battle of Narratives. The feed became a minefield. Every scroll a new volley. Every comment a spark. Dennis watched it unfold from his desk. Multiple screens streaming simultaneous conversations. TikTok debates, Instagram lives, Discord servers dissecting every frame. It wasn't just about Nina anymore. It was about everything. Authorship, digital labor, manipulation dressed as empowerment. The internet had split cleanly down the center. On one side, the loyalists. Even if she curated it, it was still her story. Men hiding behind the truth always find a way to spin the story. She gave us light. He gave us shadows. On the other, the dissenters. This is what stolen credit looks like. She didn't just sell authenticity, she engineered it. Where was her trauma when she was monetizing it? The hashtags evolved. Hashtag Justice for Dennis became a rallying cry for digital workers, ghost editors, videographers, assistants whose labor was buried behind brands. Anonymous accounts emerged, sharing their own stories. One post read, "I edited her fertility series while hiding my own miscarriage. She never asked." Another, "We pitched every line of that so-called breakup video. She rewrote none of it." Nina's team responded swiftly. They released a branded statement, a soft, saturated graphic with serif font and the caption, "My silence has been a boundary. Now it's time to speak." Below it, a carousel of vague affirmations, personal growth language, and a closing slide. "To those weaponizing my past, your voice ends where my healing begins." It only made things worse. Dennis knew it was time. He opened the stream key and prepared a live broadcast. No hype, no filter, just him, framed plainly against the matte wall of the studio. A single light above casting slow shadows under his eyes. In front of him, a quiet audience of hundreds of thousands. He took a breath. "I'm not here to break her. I'm here to break the machine that let this happen." Then he played the files. Side-by-side breakdowns. Draft scripts with handwriting notes. Voice memos of Nina rehearsing spontaneous emotions. Footage where Christoph gives silent cues behind the camera. Every illusion, contextualized. Every performance, deconstructed. No attack. No venom. Just facts. Midway through the stream, he paused. Looked into the lens. "She said I controlled her. But what's more controlling, curating a person's every pixel for reach, or refusing to lie on cue?" Comments surged across the screen. "Holy hell, she rehearsed that I can't breathe monologue? I feel complicit for ever liking her stuff." He's not bitter. He's careful. This is art as evidence. She didn't escape control. She outsourced it. By the end, Dennis sat silently. Then he reached out and turned off the light. The screen faded to black, not with drama, just closure. Somewhere in that silence, something shifted. Not victory, not vindication, but gravity. The feed, once a playground of illusions, had just met something heavier. Chapter 11. Echoes of the Past. Seattle greeted him with cold rain and silence. The kind of silence not born from absence, but memory, the kind that hangs in the damp of old neighborhoods and clings to porch railings like moss. Dennis hadn't been back in nearly 4 years. His mother's house stood exactly as he remembered. Chipped white paint, a wind chime at the door, and books stacked by subject instead of shelf. She opened the door without a word, just stepped aside and let him in. There were no questions, just a warm mug of black tea and the quiet ritual of reentry. He sat in the old reading room, now repurposed as her makeshift writing space. Rain traced familiar patterns on the window. On the desk lay a notebook with half-finished poems. The walls, still lined with shelves of old VHS tapes and documentaries, reminded him of who he used to be before the grid, the gear, the gloss. "You've lost weight," she finally said, not unkindly. "Algorithms are good for that," he replied. They didn't speak of Nina. They didn't need to. His mother had always been good at reading what was unsaid. She watched him as he looked through his old hard drives. Raw travel footage, silent interviews, color tests from the desert. Each clip a timestamp from a life before hers. He found a folder labeled Echo, his last personal project, long abandoned. He opened it. Inside, a series of interviews with street artists talking about impermanence. paintings on walls destined to be washed away, sculptures made of ice, melting as the camera rolled. One voice said, "Sometimes what makes it real is knowing it won't last." He stared at the screen, transfixed. None of it was monetizable. None of it ever went viral. And yet, every frame hummed with something Nina's content never had. Presence. Later that night, he and his mother sat on the back porch, wrapped in mismatched blankets, steam rising from their mugs. "Do you want to win?" she asked gently. "I want to matter," he said. "You always did," she replied. "You just let her hold the mirror." He nodded slowly. The war online wasn't over. But here, surrounded by rain and roots, he remembered why he picked up a camera in the first place. Not to chase reach, but to capture something that couldn't be rehearsed. In that moment, he made a quiet promise to himself. When he returned, it wouldn't be to fight her story. It would be to tell his own. Chapter 12. Rise of the Shadow Brand. While Dennis walked through wet Seattle streets rediscovering who he used to be, Los Angeles moved on without him, and Nina evolved. She didn't retreat. She rebranded. Her new profile header read, "Unscripted, unfiltered, unbroken." The pastel overlays were gone, replaced with raw textures, film grain, blurred edges, ungraded tones. Her captions, once polished down to the last emoji, now read like diary entries typed in a rush. Still healing. Learning to breathe. Some stories hurt in the telling. Christoph was everywhere and nowhere, never tagged, never named, but present. A camera angle reflected in her sunglasses, a hand adjusting her mic, a shadow behind a door left slightly ajar. He knew the language of soft exposure. He knew how to reintroduce a brand under the guise of vulnerability. Together, they launched a new content series, The Unmaking, a stripped-down, intimate journey of shedding performance and returning to self. It trended in under an hour. Nina's followers, though shaken, were ready to believe again. One posted, "People make mistakes, but the courage to face them in public? That's real power." Another, "She's not perfect. She's human. And that's why I trust her even more now." And then came the merch. Muted tones, organic fabrics, printed phrases like "soft armor," "control is a lie," and "trust the fracture." A $120 hoodie sold out in 8 minutes. The drop was accompanied by a meditation track recorded in a sacred forest, actually a sound-treated studio in Topanga, and a digital workbook titled Rituals of Return. But behind the pixels, cracks formed. A former intern posted anonymously on a subreddit. "She told us to write raw truths for her post captions. She edited out anything that didn't get engagement in A/B tests." Another ex-collaborator added, "Christoph ran strategy like a war map. Every breakdown she posted was choreographed." Still, most of the audience didn't care. The illusion was evolving. Dennis watched all of this unfold from his laptop, back in LA, sitting in the skeleton of his now-empty edit suite. The silence inside was louder than the feeds outside. He didn't respond. Not yet. But Sky did. She launched a new Instagram account at Digital Ghost Labor, a collective space for anonymous testimonies from those erased behind the scenes. The stories poured in. "I built her website while recovering from surgery. She sent a fruit basket instead of paying me. We filmed 6 candid proposals until she cried the right way. And then came the documents." Elaine hosted a live stream, screen-shared contracts, signed waivers, receipts of post-scheduling tools logged under Christoph's name, all shown with a lawyer's cool precision. Still, Nina didn't blink. She uploaded a new video the next morning. Barefaced, Close-up. Shot in monochrome. I forgive him, she whispered. It garnered 2.3 million views in 24 hours. And just like that, the shadow brand bloomed. Not in spite of the fallout, but because of it. Chapter 13. Live Exposure. The countdown hovered in the corner of the screen. 5 seconds. Dennis sat at his desk, palms flat against cool wood, eyes fixed on the streaming software. The chat was already moving too fast to follow. Anticipation boiling over in emojis rendered as words, reaction ready and hungry. On another screen, Nina's live stream began simultaneously. A split audience. A digital duel. She appeared first. Soft lighting, a muted green backdrop, a slight tremble in her voice. I didn't come here to fight, she said, hand on heart. I came to release what still hurts. Dennis clicked go live. His feed faded in with no background music, no emotional lighting. Just a static wide shot of him in his studio, shelves behind him cluttered with hard drives and camera lenses. Everything bare and utilitarian. I came to clarify, he said calmly, and to stop being someone else's ghost. The audience split-screened the two feeds. Reactions poured in, but Dennis ignored them. He opened with a timeline. On the screen, a sequence labeled Fabrication Arc. He walked them through it. Pre-recorded breakdowns, marked rehearsal cuts, timestamps showing the same emotional beat repeated in take after take. Footage of Nina asking for a second try. Make it shake more in my voice. I wanted to feel broken, but still branded. Then he played the rehearsal clip for her now iconic rooftop post. The moment where she whispered, "I've never felt more seen." In the raw take, Christoph's voice could be heard off-screen. Now look left. Smile softer. Try that line again, but slower. Make it feel like revelation. On Nina's stream, her chat exploded. Someone typed, "This is doctored. This is misogyny dressed as exposure." He's playing God with her past. But others began asking, why is there time code? Wait, she rehearsed a panic attack. Was any of this ever real? Nina didn't flinch. She smiled sadly. Of course I rehearsed. When your pain becomes your platform, you learn how to polish it. That doesn't make it false. Dennis didn't speak. Instead, he projected a contract on screen, signed by Nina, listing him as executive content director on every campaign for 3 years. Then a Slack log. Then emails with Christoph discussing the crescendo arc of the public breakup. It was clinical, quiet, devastating. Still, Dennis never raised his voice. He ended the stream with a clip no one had ever seen. Nina, on set, looking straight into the lens between takes and muttering, almost to herself, "Do you think they'd still care if they knew how fake this all is?" Then the screen went black. Dennis turned off his camera. No final word. No mic drop. Just silence. The comments didn't stop. This isn't drama. This is media history. Someone call Sundance. Now this was real. Chapter 14. Collapse and Clarity. The backlash came swift, not like a firestorm, but like a building collapsing floor by floor. First, the sponsors. A cruelty-free skincare brand pulled its name from Nina's upcoming Reclaim Your Reflection tour. The statement was clean, sterile. We stand for transparency and truth. At this time, we are reevaluating all partnerships. Then the platforms. 2 episodes of her podcast were quietly delisted from major audio apps. YouTube restricted monetization on older videos flagged for misleading context. TikTok removed trending audio tied to her brand. None of it came with direct blame, just absence. Then the team. A freelance editor posted, I was asked to remove timestamps from old raw footage before they posted it. I said no. I wasn't rehired. A former makeup artist added. We weren't allowed to speak when she filmed breakdowns. Silence kept the aesthetic clean. Christoph vanished, his accounts locked, his agency's website stripped of bios. Industry gossip hinted at NDAs. A quiet exit. A void in the narrative machine. Nina released a final statement, this time in a close-up video. I didn't mean to manipulate. I meant to heal, publicly. And maybe that's the problem. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. Just ended. The video stalled at 1 million views. No viral second wind. No redemption arc. Meanwhile, Dennis sat on the roof of a small industrial loft on the edge of the arts district. The sun was setting behind distant cranes, staining the skyline with color he hadn't seen in months. Not through a lens, just as light. Inside, his studio had been stripped of all her presence. No framed photos. No sponsorship banners. The tribute video he'd once prepared for her birthday had been deleted without backup. He was working now, writing again. His first real film project in years. A script built not from drama, but reflection. A quiet story about a man who forgets who he is inside someone else's spotlight and learns how to be visible without performance. Skye sat cross-legged on the floor, sorting hard drives. Elaine read aloud passages from fair labor clauses she was helping write into new content creation contracts. The room was calm, serious, but full of small hope. They were building something that didn't need algorithms to exist. Think it'll last? Skye asked, looking up from a labeled folder. No, Dennis said honestly, but I'll know it was real. That night, he drafted a statement. Not to post, but to finish for himself. I didn't set out to destroy her brand. I set out to rescue my own name from silence. Truth isn't content, but it can still be broadcast. He hit save, and for the first time in years, he closed his laptop without checking the feed. Chapter 15, A New Light. The theater was modest, exposed brick walls, scuffed floors, folding chairs in uneven rows. No red carpet. No influencers. Just a screen, a projector, and the hum of a crowd that had come not for spectacle, but for substance. Dennis stood at the back, palms damp, arms crossed. He hadn't planned a screen behind the frame publicly. It started as a personal exercise, a way to process everything. Not the war, but what came after. But when a small independent film festival in Austin reached out, saying they'd seen his live stream and wanted to show the story that broke the story, he said yes. He hadn't expected anyone to show up. But now, the room was full. As the lights dimmed, the first frame flickered into place. A silent shot of a man setting up a camera in an empty room. Not Nina. Not Christoph. Just Dennis. Alone, pulling focus. Then came fragments. Moments caught between takes. The raw edge of reality where no performance had been instructed. Interviews, not of Nina, but of those who had once worked with her. Hands typing, eyes darting. Quiet testimony. Not expose, not drama, just presence. In the final scene, Dennis stood in the middle of a blank set, lit by nothing but morning sun. He stared into the camera, then walked off frame. Cut to black. Silence in the room. Then applause, quiet, then growing. But not the viral kind. The real kind. The kind that rises from people who've seen something not just true, but unfiltered. A woman approached after the screening. Late 60s, silver braids, a name tag reading Clara. She took his hand. You reminded me what authorship means, she said. Not just in art, in life. He thanked her, stunned. Before she turned away, She added, freedom isn't leaving someone. It's refusing to vanish. Later, outside under the soft night sky, Elaine stood beside him. She wore her usual monochrome blazer and unreadable expression, but her voice was softer than usual. It landed, Dennis. All the way through. Sky joined them with drinks in hand. No champagne. Just ginger ale and paper cups. Reviews are already trickling in, she said. Someone called it a landmark act of narrative reclamation. Not bad for your first return. Dennis didn't smile. Not quite. But something in his shoulders eased. He looked up. The stars were faint, blurred by city haze, but they were there. I used to think truth was what you filmed, he said. But maybe it's what you choose not to crop. Elaine raised her cup. To raw edges. Sky joined in. To digital ghosts finding bodies again. Dennis raised his too. To stories told without permission, but finally with consent. For the first time in years, there was no feed to check. No narrative to fight. Just light. And the choice to let it fall where it would. Chapter 16, The Archive Room. It began with dust and silence. The space had once been a photo lab, light-proof, concrete, forgotten. Dennis found it through a filmmaker's classifieds board. Darkroom with plumbing plus silence. No questions. Monthly. That was all it said. It was perfect. No signs. No logos. Just a basement off an alleyway in Echo Park with a steel door and terrible cell service. He signed the lease without negotiation and moved in a week later. The walls were bare. The air smelled faintly of metal and memory. He laid the first hard drive on the center table like a relic. This wasn't a studio. It was a reckoning. He named it the archive room. There were no ring lights. No trending sounds. Just rows of footage. Raw, forgotten, unfinished. Clips that had once been deemed off-brand. Too real, bad for metrics. A woman whispering after a panic attack, not to perform it, but because she couldn't speak louder. A man quitting a shoot midday after being told to smile less. A voice saying, "This doesn't feel like truth anymore." Dennis began cataloging it all. Not to expose. To preserve. SYK joined him 3 days later. She brought a printer, a sleeping bag, and a folder labeled Invisible Hands. Contracts, NDAs, emails from ex-assistants who had nowhere else to speak. Elaine brought a legal firewall and the beginnings of something bigger. A formal framework for creative labor rights in digital spaces. Together, they outlined a plan. Not a revenge campaign. A public resource. A space for creators erased by their own creation. Workshops. Panels. Anonymous testimony. A database of credit restitution cases. One wall became a screen. On it looped footage that had never seen daylight. One reel in particular became a kind of ritual. Nina, pre-viral, struggling through a vlog take. She stumbles, breaks character, then looks directly at the lens. "I don't know who I am when this camera's off," she whispers. Not performance. Not confession. Just a glitch in the mask. Visitors began arriving. Former editors, producers, voiceover artists, caption writers. Some stayed for coffee. Others left notebooks behind. One drew a quote on the wall. "If the frame is false, the footage still remembers." What began as an act of preservation turned into quiet defiance. The archive room wasn't about Nina anymore. It was about the rest of them. The people who held the lights, framed the moments, wrote the lines, and got cut from the credits. Dennis watched it grow from behind his desk. No spotlight. No trending sound. Just people reclaiming authorship. One lost clip at a time. Chapter 17. The Return of the Mask. It came in soft focus. Nina reappeared on the grid without warning. No teaser, no countdown. The post was a grainy photo of a forest, dew on pine needles, light breaking through mist. The caption read, "The silence wasn't absence. It was ritual." Her profile was entirely redesigned. Gone were the pastel wellness tones and scripted affirmations. In their place, earthy textures, muted palette, hand-lettered quotes about grief, transformation, and the soul's sovereignty. Her bio now read, survivor, storyteller, shadow worker. The audience surged back. They didn't ask for proof. They asked for meaning. Next came a series of black and white videos titled Becoming After. They featured Nina seated on floor cushions, a candle burning beside her, camera handheld and slightly shaky, designed to feel vulnerable, almost unfinished. In each, she spoke softly about betrayal, trauma, and the importance of rebuilding one's voice from ashes. Not once did she name Dennis. She didn't have to. She referred instead to those who tried to monetize my unraveling, and systems that weaponize visibility to erase feminine truth. It wasn't a direct attack. It was sleight of hand, and it worked. The comments swelled with devotion. You've evolved beyond their narratives. This is what resurrection looks like. She didn't return. She rebirthed. The algorithms responded in kind. Engagement doubled in a week. Brands that had distanced themselves began quietly returning. This time, not to promote beauty serums or supplements, but handcrafted journals, herbal therapy boxes, ceremonial retreats. Nina launched a new product line, the Echo Collection. Loose linen robes, smudge sticks, sandalwood eye pillows, embossed notebooks with phrases like "My voice is mine again" and "Heal louder." The marketing tagline? We're the work. It was genius. It wasn't a comeback. It was a metamorphosis. Christophe, notably, remained absent. His name had vanished from the credits. But those in the industry whispered he was still directing, still structuring content calendars under a different shell agency. Dennis watched it unfold with strange calm. He wasn't surprised. Nina hadn't broken. She'd shifted frequencies. She didn't need to win the narrative war. She just had to outlast it. But Elaine said it best, over coffee in the archive room. She didn't reclaim her voice. She just gave the mask a new name. Sky was more blunt. She turned healing into merch. Again. Still, Dennis didn't react publicly. Not with a post. Not with a rebuttal. Instead, he returned to editing. Because while Nina curated emotion for resale, he was assembling a new kind of record. Not built to trend, but built to remain. Chapter 18, The Symposium. It was held in a converted warehouse in San Francisco, all rusted beams and repurposed steel. The kind of place where architecture still remembered the weight of labor. Inside, no stage, no green room, no velvet ropes, just a circle of mismatched chairs beneath a skylight smeared with fog. They called it the Digital Ethics Symposium. But that wasn't what it felt like. It felt more like a reckoning with an audience. Dennis hadn't planned to speak. He'd been invited as a panelist, behind the frame, invisible labor in the age of influence, but assumed he'd sit quietly. Instead, by the second hour, the room turned toward him. A woman stood up, maybe 35, sharp-eyed, arms folded. "When you released that footage," she said, "did you think about how it would land on people like me? People who used her content to survive something real?" There was no anger in her voice, only exhaustion. Dennis didn't flinch. "I thought about that every day," he said. "And I still don't know if I did the right thing. But I do know I didn't lie." The room was silent. Another voice followed, older, steadier. Do you think she ever believed the story she was telling? Dennis paused, then answered, I think she believed the mask while she was wearing it. That's what made it dangerous. Elaine stepped in then, unfolding a binder of case studies. She spoke of unpaid teams behind six-figure brands, of ghostwriters whose emotional trauma had been mined and monetized, of editors who stitched together healing journeys they themselves couldn't afford. Truth in the influencer economy, she said, is not defined by honesty. It's defined by resonance. And resonance, as we now know, can be simulated. A quiet ripple moved through the room. Sky took the mic next. She wasn't polished. She didn't need to be. We're not here to cancel anyone. We're here because content has consequences. And because the people who hold the cameras, who edit the breakdowns, who schedule the lies, they deserve to be visible too. The applause was soft but long. Later, someone pinned a quote on the bulletin wall near the coffee station. If you build a house of mirrors, don't be surprised when someone smashes one just to see the sky. Dennis stood beneath it, rereading the line. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt steady. After the panel, a college student approached him. I dropped out of a content strategy program last year. Watching your documentary made me want to build again, but better. For people, not reach. He smiled, truly smiled. Not for a lens. Not for optics. For the first time, the impact wasn't measured in metrics. It was measured in momentum. Chapter 19, The Message. The letter came in a cream-colored envelope, no return address, postmarked from a small town in New Mexico. Dennis found it wedged between studio invoices and a nonprofit flyer. At first, he thought it was a formality, some delayed paperwork from the Symposium. But the handwriting on the front stopped him. He recognized it instantly. Tight, elegant, slanted slightly to the left. Nina. He hesitated before opening it, then sat at the long table in the archive room, turned off his phone, and unfolded the single page. The letter wasn't long. I've watched the silence between us fill with other people's voices. Some ugly, some honest, some useful. I won't pretend I wasn't trying to outrun what I did. You filmed everything. I framed it. And somewhere in between, I lost sight of what was being shown. Or maybe I never saw it to begin with. You were never invisible to me. That was the problem. You were too clear, too consistent. And I needed fog to make my performance feel like something worth watching. You didn't destroy me. You just stopped editing the story in my favor. That was your right. I get that now. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted to tell you what you made after I left. That was truth. And it hurt to see. But it hurt because it was clean. Don't come back. And don't erase it. Keep building where you are. It matters. There was no signature. Dennis folded the paper and placed it in a drawer with no label. He didn't feel vindicated. He didn't feel regret. He felt released. That evening, he edited something short. Just a 2-minute video. No dialogue. No caption. The first clip was a camera turning on, catching his reflection in the lens. Then, moments from the archive room, Sky laughing mid-sentence, Elaine sketching legal diagrams on a whiteboard, visitors setting up tripods, scanning documents, eating sandwiches between timelines. Then, the streets outside, people walking. No filters. No focus pulls. Final shot. His hands, threading film through a projector. Light flickering to life. Cut. He uploaded it under a blank title. Within hours, people found it. Comments followed. I don't know what this is, but I feel more seen than I have in months. No music. No voiceover. Just human. This is what it looks like when someone doesn't need to win anymore. Nina didn't respond. Her followers didn't flood the thread. There were no duets, no stitch trends, just quiet resonance. Not everything viral needed to go loud. Sometimes truth traveled best in whispers. Chapter 20. Dawn. The morning was cool and quiet, the sky a muted blue just beginning to blush. From the rooftop of the archive room, the city stretched outward, not buzzing yet, just humming low, like something breathing under a blanket. Dennis stood at the edge, sipping burnt coffee from a chipped enamel mug. Beside him, Sky was hunched over a notebook, sketching a diagram for an outreach program they were launching, free training for undercredited digital workers. Elaine was inside, still on a late call with a media union in Toronto. The sun rose slowly behind the sprawl of cranes and low-slung warehouses. Nothing cinematic, nothing staged, just light, pure, undirected. They had been working in the archive room for months now. What had started as a bunker of memory had become something else, part refuge, part think tank, part invisible movement. Creators came and went. Some left footage, others just stories. A few sat in silence and stayed for hours, not saying a word. They had published nothing viral in weeks. And yet their inbox stayed full. Dennis walked inside and past the whiteboard wall, now covered in messy handwriting. One quote stood out, circled 3 times. Healing isn't broadcast. It's built. He sat at his desk and opened a blank project. No footage yet. Just an idea. A series. Not a takedown. Not a confession. A new kind of story. Real lives, told on their terms. No hashtags. No collapse arcs. Just people unlearning performance. He smiled, not wide, not performative, just quietly. He hadn't picked up a camera in 3 days. That was okay. Some frames needed time. Some stories needed stillness. Downstairs, the main room buzzed with the rhythm of a Saturday beginning. A visiting filmmaker set up a tripod. A volunteer organized hard drives by year. Someone played a lo-fi jazz track through dusty speakers. It was messy, unbranded, alive. Elaine finally emerged, stretching, eyes bleary but determined. "They're in," she said. "The Canadian Fund wants to replicate the archive room. Vancouver's next." Sky raised her cup. "Global ghost labor, watch out." They laughed, but it wasn't sharp. It was soft, earned. Dennis looked out the tall windows. The sun was climbing now, shadows receding. He turned on his camera, not to film, just to check exposure. The light hit him squarely. No filters, no retakes, no script. Just him, finally centered in the frame, without needing to be. He didn't smile for the lens. He just stood still and let the morning take him. Not every truth is loud. Some arrive in stillness, like light through dust, like a voice remembered rather than heard. Dennis never returned to the feed, not to explain, not to perform. He chose quiet rooms, honest work, and the kind of visibility that doesn't require permission. He learned that exposure isn't always destruction. Sometimes it's resurrection of dignity, of identity, of authorship long denied. He stopped asking who controlled the narrative. Instead, he built a life that didn't need one. The world moved on, scrolling faster than ever. But somewhere, in a room filled with forgotten footage and rising sun, a man stood behind the lens, not to shape someone else's story, but finally to live his own. And this time, he stayed in the frame.